For 50 years, scientists stared at two enormous arms, trying to figure out what kind of nightmare creature they once belonged to. But that mystery is nothing compared to the bizarre, prehistoric beings I'm about to tell you about. These are ancient creatures that science, even today, still cannot fully explain. And to begin, we have to talk about a species that sounds like a joke, but was completely real: the walking whale. Let's start with something that would have made Darwin smirk: a whale that could walk. Not fins, not flippers, but actual legs, strong enough to lift its body on dry land. Around 49 million years ago, this animal roamed the rivers of South Asia. Its name was Ambulocetus, meaning the walking whale. It had 4 powerful limbs, webbed feet, crocodile-like jaws, and, most fascinating of all, ears built to hear underwater. A bizarre draft in the evolution's notebook, yet somehow it worked perfectly. Picture it: a 10-foot creature lurking in the shallows, eyes perched high on its head like a periscope. It waited, silent, cold, and then lunged, snapping up anything foolish enough to drink nearby. It was essentially a prehistoric prototype of today's crocodiles. Long before crocodiles perfected the ambush tactic, Ambulocetus had already been doing it millions of years earlier. But the strangest part wasn't its legs, it was its hearing. Like modern whales, it heard through its jawbones, transmitting vibrations directly to the inner ear. In other words, this animal could hear fish moving underwater and the footsteps of predators on land. It wasn't just an evolutionary experiment. It was the blueprint for a perfect amphibious hunter. If you ask me, Ambulocetus was nature's beta version of the whale, one that never needed an update. It had a strong tail for swimming, curved teeth to grip struggling prey, and legs capable of a strategic retreat when things went wrong. A flexible design, optimized for every scenario. But over time, its descendants began to abandon land altogether. Bodies stretched longer, limbs shrank, and within just a few million years, the ocean reclaimed its long-lost child. Ambulocetus marked the last moment whales could still change their mind about living underwater. Fossils of Ambulocetus are extremely rare. Usually, paleontologists only find fragments and have to guess the rest. But one near-complete specimen found in Pakistan finally showed, in stone, how a land mammal turned into a marine creature. A geological miracle, a fossilized snapshot of evolution asking itself, what's so fun about going to the beach? Titanoboa, the giant snake. Now let's move on to something hotter. Literally, when the dinosaurs disappeared, Earth turned into a massive greenhouse, and the snake said, "Hold my beer." In a Colombian coal mine, scientists discovered vertebrae the size of dinner plates. At first, they thought they belonged to a crocodile, but no. It was Titanoboa, a snake nearly 47 feet long and weighing over 2,000 pounds. A monster that makes you wonder if evolution sometimes just shows off. But Titanoboa wasn't enormous just for intimidation. It had to be that big, because the planet back then was like a natural oven. Snakes are cold-blooded. They rely on environmental heat. Around 60 million years ago, average temperatures in Colombia reached 93 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. That's why Titanoboa existed. It was a living thermometer of ancient Earth. Scientists can even estimate prehistoric climate simply by measuring its size, a terrifying but convenient way to gauge temperature. Show me how big the snake was and I'll tell you how hot the planet got. The funny thing is, Titanoboa didn't hunt mammals or crocodiles. Its favorite meal was fish. A snake the size of a bus that specialized in catching fish. Its jaw had small, flexible teeth, perfect for gripping slippery prey. It glided silently through swamps, coiling like a lazy nightmare, swallowing giant fish whole. But when the world cooled, Titanoboa couldn't keep warm. And just like that, game over. Too big, too cold, too dead. Meanwhile, mammals began to rise because they could generate their own heat. You could call it the evolution of central heating. If Titanoboa was the symbol of brute power, humans became the product of a smarter survival strategy. Once again, nature whispered, "Size is impressive, but adaptability is what keeps you alive." Jacalopterus, the giant scorpion, Yet Titanoboa still seems tame compared to what waits for you at the river's end. Question: what's the worst place to encounter a canoe-sized scorpion? If you guessed while swimming, congratulations. You now understand why the Devonian period wasn't ideal for fishing trips. Meet Jackalopterus, a creature almost 8.5 feet long, with claws stretching 18 inches. It didn't live in the sea, but in freshwater rivers in what is now Germany. In short, it was a swimming nightmare. Scientists first discovered it from a single claw. Just looking at that massive pincer must have taken them a moment to decide whether to keep digging. Once the full skeleton was reconstructed, they realized it wasn't a giant water bug, but the apex predator of ancient rivers. Jackalopterus had extremely sensitive compound eyes, hollow but strong exoskeletons, and claw tips lined with small teeth to rip through fish armor. Because back then, the fish didn't go down without a fight. They started growing natural metal armor, thick plated scales as hard as forged steel. And that was the beginning of a biological arms race. Fish grew thicker armor, scorpions grew bigger claws. Fish toughened up, scorpions got stronger. Simple, elegant, and bloody. That evolutionary race lasted millions of years until the late Devonian extinction wiped out most armored species. Jackalopterus, a predator specialized in cracking armor, lost its main source of food, and like any business dependent on a single client, it went bankrupt soon after. Not because it was weak, but because it was too good at one thing. Meanwhile, smaller, more flexible creatures survived. Fossils tell these stories as warnings from the past. Never be too perfect in a world that never stands still. Ambulocetus was adaptable, but had to choose the sea. Titanoboa ruled, but felt a temperature change. Jackalopterus was powerful, but died from its own perfection. Evolution doesn't reward the strongest, it rewards the most adaptable, an ancient rule that still applies today. And those are only 3 creatures that continue to astonish science. But if you think that's strange enough, remember, beneath our feet lie millions of fossils still waiting, quietly to be dug up and tell their stories again. All you need to do is listen or dare to believe that nature sometimes is far more creative than we imagine. At least the river monsters stayed in the water. The next one, however, didn't. When paleontologists in Texas discovered a fragment of an enormous wing bone, they thought they were seeing things. They measured it, then measured it again, then went silent, looking at each other as if their entire careers had just been challenged. Because what they were holding belonged to the largest flying creature ever to live on Earth, Quetzalcoatlus, the creature that defied gravity. Its wingspan stretched 36 feet, tall as a fully grown giraffe when standing upright. And the most astonishing part? It survived until the very end of the Cretaceous, living peacefully among dinosaurs on the brink of extinction. In other words, Quetzalcoatlus spent 68 million years laughing in the face of physics. How could something the size of a small airplane actually fly? Did it leap from cliffs? Wait for strong winds? Not at all. The answer: it pushed off the ground with its arms and vaulted into the air like a bodybuilder. Picture this: a 4-legged creature crouched low, wings folded tight against its back, suddenly springing 8 feet upward, unfurling its vast wings and soaring away. No runway, no wind, just one mighty jump. It used a unique arm-powered takeoff method unmatched in the animal kingdom. Once airborne, Quetzalcoatlus could glide for hours without flapping, riding columns of hot air rising from the dinosaur plains below. Perhaps it glanced down at a herd of T-Rex and thought, "Good luck down there, walkers." For decades, scientists thought it was a giant vulture, circling overhead to feast on carcasses. A fair guess, until someone re-examined its leg bones. Turns out Quetzalcoatlus was a ground hunter. Yes, a flying giraffe, walking on folded wings while stalking prey smaller than a human. It didn't dive into water for fish. That would have been impossible with a 6-foot-long beak. Instead, it strolled across Cretaceous grasslands, pecking at baby dinosaurs, lizards, or small mammals. Anything too slow to escape. Imagine walking along and looking up to see a 7-meter-tall stork staring straight at you. Nobody ever wanted to become that thing's lunch. But then, a rock from space came crashing down, and suddenly being airplane-sized was no longer an advantage. As ash darkened the sky and temperatures plummeted, giants like Quetzalcoatlus could no longer rise again. In evolution, timing is everything, and it had chosen the wrong moment to live. Still, at least it was charming compared to what evolution was about to do to birds. Kelenken, the terror bird, a perfect killing machine. A high school student in Argentina was taking a walk when he noticed a 28-inch skull sticking out of the rock. While his friends were picking up soda cans, he picked up humanity's next nightmare. It was Kelenken, a bird nearly 10 feet tall, weighing over 400 pounds with a beak powerful enough to shatter a car windshield. Welcome to the Miocene epoch, when South America was isolated from the rest of the world and birds ruled the land. While the rest of the planet let mammals become top predators, South America said, "No need, we've got birds." And they did the job brilliantly. Kelenken's head was larger than that of some dinosaurs. Its hooked beak was razor sharp, its skull thick, and its neck muscles so strong they could swing down like a battle axe. Its hunting strategy was terrifyingly simple. Run fast, then strike repeatedly until the prey stopped moving. No wrestling, no dragging, just pure surgical violence. Back then, Kelenken wasn't alone. South America had saber-toothed marsupials, giant short-faced bears, and predatory wolves. Yet the terror bird still reigned supreme for millions of years. The entire continent was like an alternate Earth, a world where birds ruled and mammals were the ones hiding in fear. Until the South American continent reconnected with North America, and modern predators like jaguars, dogs, and bears poured in. The birds, long accustomed to having no rivals, were unprepared. When the game changed, they couldn't adapt in time. Kelenken didn't go extinct because it was weak. It perished because it had lived too long in a closed world. It proved that in evolution, no throne is eternal. But if you think that's the end of the freak show, think again. Because now we come to a creature that made scientists scratch their heads and ask, what on earth is that? Imagine a creature with a horse's head, gorilla arms, claws like a giant sloth, and it's vegetarian. Introducing Chalicotherium, living proof that evolution sometimes forgets to reread its own drafts. This animal walked on its knuckles, protecting its long, sickle-shaped claws. Those claws weren't for fighting. They were for pulling down branches to eat leaves. It had horse-like teeth but a predator's body, a real-life paradox. For years, scientists thought they'd found 3 different species. One described horse-like teeth, another described huge claws, and yet another claimed it was a giant pangolin. Only when they pieced the fossils together did they realize it was all the same creature. Chalicotherium was essentially a prehistoric forklift, complete with hip pads perfect for sitting down and chewing leaves for hours. A flawless design for forest life. And that was the problem. Its entire existence depended on dense forests. As the global climate cooled and forests turned to open grasslands, these leaf-harvesting machines lost their source of life. You simply can't walk on your knuckles across an open prairie. A few species survived into the Pleistocene, just a few million years ago, but those were the final breaths of a vanished ecosystem. From Quetzalcoatlus to Kelenken to Chalicotherium, each was a different draft in nature's notebook. Each one was perfect for its time until the world changed. Evolution isn't fair. It simply says, adapt or disappear. So the next time you complain about adapting to new technology or rising temperatures, remember, some creatures once grew 47 feet long, flew with their arms, or used claws to pick leaves. At least we still have thumbs, Wi-Fi, and a better survival rate than Quetzalcoatlus. We're doing all right, aren't we? Chalicotherium proved a funny truth. Being perfectly adapted isn't always good. Sometimes evolution's genius ideas are really just evolutionary dead ends. But hey, at least it still had normal teeth. The next creature? It had 500 of them, and replaced them every 2 weeks. That means it grew a new tooth every 20 minutes of its life. Congratulations! You've just met the living dental factory of the Cretaceous, Nigersaurus. The walking lawnmower Nigersaurus was about 30 feet long, with a short neck, a flat shovel-shaped head, and a perpetual downward gaze. CT scans of its skull revealed paper-thin bones, just 2 millimeters thick, nearly transparent. To stay that light, it had to sacrifice everything else that made dinosaurs powerful. Weak jaws, a gentle bite force, bones as fragile as cardboard. Instead of raising its neck to feed on trees like its cousin Brachiosaurus, Nigersaurus spent its life grazing low, mowing plants face first. Its teeth were arranged in conveyor belts, working rows in front, replacements queued behind. Every day it moved along the ancient rivers of Africa, vacuuming up soft plants like a Mesozoic Roomba. Strange? Yes, but it worked, until the climate changed and those soft plants disappeared. Nigersaurus teaches us that survival sometimes means radical simplicity, but when the world changes, that simplicity becomes a burden. If your entire body is built for one type of food, one menu change ends the game. The vegetarian cat with fangs. Next, imagine you're a paleontologist in a South African museum and you find a skull the size of your hand, with a parrot-like beak, vampire fangs, and a body covered in stiff, porcupine-like bristles. Meet Pigomastax africanus, a creature the size of a cat with the attitude of a punk rocker. Discovered in the 1960s, it spent 45 years locked away in storage because no one knew what to make of it. When re-examined in 2012, scientists realized it was a plant-eating dinosaur with a flair for drama. Its fangs weren't for hunting, but for intimidation. Don't touch my salad, basically. The bristles allowed it to puff up and scare off animals twice its size. In short, a tiny vegetarian, cranky, fashion-forward creature. If there were a mascot for small but angry energy, Pigomastax would win it. Scientists call it a heterodontosaur, but really, it's the sassy cat of the Jurassic. The arms that drove science crazy. For 50 years, museums had only 2 gigantic arms, each 8 feet long, no head, no body. Researchers nicknamed them the arms of the Mongolian death god. They imagined a super predator with enormous claws, tearing everything apart. Then in 2014, the truth made the world laugh. Those arms belonged to Deinocheirus mirificus, a desert duck 36 feet tall, weighing over 7 tons with a camel-like hump and tail feathers. In its fossilized stomach, scientists found fish scales. Yes, the legendary killer was actually a peaceful, fish-eating vegetarian. Those terrifying claws that inspired half a century of nightmares? They were for digging roots and pulling branches. 50 years of speculation collapsed overnight, leaving just one conclusion. Never judge a creature by its arms. The soft-skinned creature with a crown of horns. Now let's rewind time even further, 267 million years back, to the swamps of ancient Russia, long before the dinosaurs. There, a half-reptile, half-mammal creature roamed, soft-skinned, with oily glands like modern mammals, and 4 strange horns crowning its head. Its name was Astemenosuchus, meaning the crowned crocodile. Its skin structure shows evidence of thermoregulatory glands, similar to the cooling systems found in mammals. In other words, it invented mammalian skin long before mammals existed. It lived in herds, used its horns for communication and recognition amid the swamps, regulating body heat, protecting one another, and in a sense, stepping 1 foot into the future. And here's the wildest part. Astemenosuchus was a therapsid, the ancient ancestor of mammals, which means we didn't invent glandular skin. Our ancestors had it, lost it, and evolved it again 200 million years later. Evolution, it turns out, has a very long memory. From Nigersaurus to Astemenosuchus, they all tell the same story. Nature doesn't follow rules. Sometimes great inventions appear early, vanish, and return only when the world is ready. Evolution doesn't care about fairness. It only cares about what works. And that's why I love telling stories like these, where lawnmower dinosaurs, vegetarian cats with fangs, and giant ducks that dig roots all coexist in the same universe. If you also find nature crazy yet oddly lovable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so we can keep exploring the moments when evolution decided to get creative. From arms misunderstood for half a century, to walking whales, sunbathing giant snakes, and man-sized birds, all tell the same tale. Nature has never stopped experimenting. Sometimes it creates geniuses, sometimes just jokes written in fossilized bone. But every creature, no matter how strange, is a vital piece of the puzzle that made our world possible. Evolution doesn't care about fairness or beauty. It only favors what can survive one more day. And among the vanished giants, it's the small and adaptable who inherit the future. And that future is us. So if one day you feel the world is changing too fast, remember, Earth has survived every kind of chaos before. Nature never stops creating, and neither should we. Because in the end, we are the product of that imagination. So tell me, when the next turn of evolution comes, will humans still be the chosen ones? Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so we can find out together in the next episode. Terra Vij, where the past never truly sleeps.